Hey guys, Locke here. Today we're going to talk about Thancred. He can be played offensively, defensively, or as a support character. He can be a huge powerhouse if you invest heavily into him, but even if you leave him at limit break 0, he has his uses, both offensively and defensively. But we'll get into that a bit later. For now, let's just talk about his stats. He has high HP with attack type resistance that is on par with Engelbert's. In fact, his strike resistance is 10% higher than Engelbert's, with everything else being the same. In addition to his durability, he also has a decent attack stat, along with a variety of offensive and defensive skills. He is not a typical jack-of-all-trades kind of character, so to speak, because although he can do many things, he can't do all of those things at once. So the best way to talk about him would be to talk about him under each of those three roles. Let's first look at his offensive physical DPS role. As a physical DPS, you'll want to subclass him to Dragoon. We'll get into that in a second, but for now let's just talk about his Gunbreaker main skills. The notable skills here are his slash attack buff, his shield, and Rough Divide, which is his bread and butter skill. Rough Divide has a range of 4, and it can also pass through other objects like pillars or walls, and even other units. So it's almost like a teleport skill that has a range of 4. Under his Dragoon subjob, he gets access to a 42% attack buff, which is Dragon Skin, and he gets Dragon Standard, which is a +1 move, +1 jump skill. He also gets access to Horizontal Jump, which is actually what makes this class so good. You're probably wondering why I'm saying that, because you're probably annoyed of him using Horizontal Jump because of the cast time, but hopefully I can change your mind. The best thing about Horizontal Jump is that it gives Thancred 2 different types of attack. All his other attack skills under his Gunbreaker main are slash type, but his jump and horizontal jump skills are both piercing type. This means that you can use him against bosses that have a weakness to either slash or piercing type damage. Most characters only have one type of damage, so they don't have this kind of versatility that Thancred does. Horizontal jump also has a range of 5, which is on par with other long-range damage skills that Orlando or Stern has. It also keeps him out of harm's way because it is basically a ranged attack at range 5. Regarding skills with cast time, like horizontal jump, you can actually see when the skill will finish casting. Once you select the skill and you select an enemy, you can click on action order on the lower left, which will tell you when your skill finishes casting. You can use this to make sure that when you cast your skill, your opponent doesn't move before you finish casting, to always make sure your attack connects. For Auto Arena, I just make sure to pair him up against someone who has a faster agility than he does, because I want him to go second. That way I can make sure that his attack connects. He might be a little bit tricky to use in GVG, but again, with playing around with his agility, you probably can find a sweet spot of where to use him. As for farming, just find someone else. I mean, horizontal jump will keep missing, so just use another character. You probably have a lot of characters by now anyway, right? The biggest reason why you should run him as a Dragoon, though, is because you don't really have much of a choice. If you run him as a Gunbreaker, he will go around using buffs on your characters. The way to counteract that is to use a Vow of Love on him, but that should typically go to your tank. So if you want him to be a physical DPS, you should run him as a Dragoon. But on that note, let's look at how he would look like as a tank. As a tank, you'll want to change his subjob to Gunbreaker. This would give him access to a defense buff, which adds 25 defense, and a regen buff, which gives him 10% of HP every turn at the beginning of the turn. But if you are going to run him as a tank, you really need to get the Vow of Love card. Without that card, he makes a terrible tank. And the reason for that is because he will keep running to your allies and buffing them instead of towards the enemy to tank. But what this Vow of Love card does is that it makes him target himself with this buff. Since he has targeted himself, he has no reason to go towards his allies, so he runs towards his enemies. So the first turn, he will actually use his regen buff. And the next turn, he will use his slash attack buff. And usually by the third turn, he would have reached his enemy, so he would start attacking and tanking. This probably makes it very easy to figure out how to run him as a support. It would be the exact same build, but without the Vow of Love card. So that way he runs towards the tank and buffs them instead of himself. You just have to make sure that whoever your tank is has that Vow of Love card equipped so that Thancred will buff him. In addition to the 3 different roles that Thancred can take, his passives also give him an additional layer of versatility, unlike most other characters. So he has resistance to pierce type attacks, missile type attacks, and also magic attacks. Taking those passives will increase the effect of those resistance by an additional 15%. So for content where the boss is only using piercing attacks, take this piercing resist on him. It makes it really built for a very versatile kind of character. In addition to that, he also has a 15% HP passive and a 15 starting AP passive as well that you can take for general uses. He also has a jump passive as well, which you can take for some maps which has a lot of height restrictions and things like that. And overall, I mean, it makes him a very versatile character that you can build for a whole number of occasions. Even if you only have Thancred at limit break 0, you can still access these skills. Heart of Stone, which is a defense buff for him or any of his allies. Aurora, which is a regen buff, again for him or any of his allies. And Keen Edge, which is a 2-hit combo. So the reason I'm highlighting these skills, first of all, the buffs, we don't really need too much explanation. It's because it'll help any of your characters do better. They will be very handy, especially in content like the tower, where you will want to clear as many floors of it as possible in the least amount of days. So an additional 25 defense or health regen will definitely help out. For those of you unfamiliar with the tower, I'd highly recommend you go and find some videos about it, because it's something that you probably should prepare for if you care about trying to clear it. Because you will need not just 3 or 4 champions, you will need a lot of them too. So those buffs help out your other allies, and he'll be used as a defensive support. But he can also be used as an offensive support, because most of the characters that everyone in Global is building right now is a slash type attacker. So those buffs will make him like a defensive kind of support, helping out your other allies to be, more sturdy. But this Keen Edge skill will actually help him to also be used as an offensive support too. Most of the characters that we're building in Global are slash attack types. Orlando, Stern, Gilgamesh, they're all like physical attack DPS characters that all use slash type attacks. So this skill, Keen Edge, is a 2-hit combo, which means it'll be much more easier for you to build a chain link against the boss, doing a lot more damage to them. So on some turns, he can buff your allies. On the other turns, he can actually stay away from the boss's AoE range and still build up those chains. As long as you have a tank with the Vow of Love equipped on him and Thancred is out of the boss's AoE range, if the boss has any AoE, he should be safe. Safe enough to build up those chains and buff your allies. So this is my review on Thancred. I hope you learned something out of it. You can at least see how versatile he is. He has many different uses. He can be used defensively, or as support. Maybe you can share in the comments below what your favorite build of him is and how you use him. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.